We're here on the Old Connecticut Path, just south of the Westford village on Route 89 in Ashford, Connecticut. According to Charles Chisholm, as recorded in Harold Ayre's book, The Great Trail of New England, the Old Connecticut Path crosses here just south of Grass Hill in Westford, a part of Ashford, Connecticut. And there's a stone monument here to commemorate the passage of important travelers in the settlement of Connecticut. As we zoom in on the marker, we can read the inscription as "The Trail, John Oldham, 1634, Pastor John Wareham, 1635, and Pastor Thomas Hooker, 1636. Charles Chisholm recorded that the trail travels west from here for about a mile up to Westford Hill and his uncle's farm on Old Codfish Road. We're going to take a walk today down across the Mount Hope Valley and the ford of the river and continue on up to Westford Hill, just as Charles Chisholm laid out and described to Harold Ayres. From immediately across the trail marker on Route 89, we head downhill following a very old cart path parallel to an ancient wall. Stop for a moment coming down the hill from the trail marker on Route 89. We look back up the hill and we can see that the path is well rutted here and well worn. And as we turn, we come to something that was one of the remarkable oddities and surprises of walking in search of the Old Connecticut Path. A place that I call the Great Wall of Westford. And we'll walk right out on here to see this colonial construction. As we walk across this wall, you can see that it's easily 4 to 5 feet wide, some places 6 feet wide, and at easily 4 feet above, as we pan around here, you can see it crossing a marshy wetland. And this extends right across to the other side. So it does give the appearance, at least, of being a footway or bridle path across some very difficult terrain. It would be difficult to cross during seasons of the year where there'd be snowmelt and flooding. As we continue on the wall and look over, we can see it's still wet, damp land. Would not be farmland by any means, possibly pasture, but it raises some questions as to what the origin of this structure is. As we look at property lines in this area, and the Google Maps show that this wall, running 500 feet across this wetland, forms the boundary between two properties, to the north and the property to the south. Up ahead we have opportunity to step off of the wall to get down so we get a sense of, how massive it is in relation to the landscape here. As part of the wall appears to have collapsed. So we come down around and the first thing you notice is how soggy, wet the land is down below here. But as we come back around and look at this wall, you can see a sense of just how massive it is running through this marsh. And I'm going to pull myself into the picture here so we get a sense of, again, if I'm 6 foot tall, this is at least 4 feet at this point with massive stones placed here. Back around to look at this and even zoom in on some of the stonework here. You can see these are immense stones that have been placed as part of this wall running across the marsh. As we climb back up onto the wall, we're about at the midpoint, and we can look back the distance that we've traveled along the wall. And as we come around, looking to the west, we see the wall again continuing as a continuous track across these marshy lands. As we near the end, you can see parts of the wall that have fallen over time. But essentially, this wall and this pathway are preserved over centuries of time. And we rise again towards the end of the path, leading on to the crossing of the Mount Hope River. But as we can see, it's a rather remarkable structure leading across the land here and on to dry ground and firm land. Here at the end of the Great Wall, we can see that it's fitting in a way that the wall has been ended and displaced over time by the taking the root of a large tree and separating the stones and pushing them aside. Looking back, we can see the extent of the Great Wall of Westford. By my estimates, it's over 500 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 4 feet high. So we're looking at an immense amount of stone that was placed here to construct this wall and this walkway. Doing some calculations on this, just for the heck of it, this amounts to over 10,000 cubic feet of stone, and at 160 pounds per cubic foot, we're talking about 1.6 million pounds of stone that was placed, or 800 tons. And as you've seen in the construction, it's likely it was all done by hand. And as you've seen as we've walked across here, this was not rich farmland that it was crossing. It was crossing wetlands and soggy ground. As we look back at this immense structure, one has to wonder, what were they thinking, those early settlers who built this wall? Was it built to provide a boundary between property and to protect pastures and fields? Or was this a way of improving the path for passage across difficult terrain in the early history of the Old Connecticut Path? Now, there is record in the Connecticut Assembly that Governor Hopkins was given permission and direction by the Assembly to take action to improve the path in 1645 and on, so that travel from Mass Bay to Hartford would be easier. So as an alternative to considering this as a possible farmer's wall to separate their fields or pastures, this could potentially be the line of the path as it was improved in the very earliest years of the Connecticut colony. Leave the wall behind. We turn west for just a short distance through the woods here, following the line of this old stone wall to the crossing point of the Mount Hope River. As we descend the hill to the Mount Hope River, we round the bend, and into view comes the second wonder of our walk today along the Old Connecticut Path, as we reach the stepping stones that were placed very early in the history of the path to provide a safe way to step across the river. We've done this crossing before without falling in, but we'll see if we can do it today and keep our feet dry. Step down to the river and see if it's possible today for me to cross the river without mishap. The last little bit. I did manage to make it across the river with one misstep right at the end. So it can be crossed today following the footsteps of the ancestors who walked on the Old Connecticut Path. And we turn, and the Old Connecticut Path provides an option of trails. There's the cart road that circles around and traverses the hill to the top and joins at the crossing on Oaks Road. And there's the path that perhaps Charles Chisholm described and mapped that goes on the direct route and steeply up the hill to Westford Hill. Along the old path, going straight up the hill, we see evidence of, on the path, the reinforcement of stone laid across the path and this stream bed to make it more passable for travelers. As we look up the hill, you can see that it marches right straight up the line on the hill to the summit and onto Oaks Road. Road on Westford Hill, at the point where the Old Connecticut Path crosses and comes out from the woods, coming up from the Mount Hope River. As the trail crosses Oak Road and goes up the hill to Westford Hill, the trail is no longer passable or accessible. Westford Hill Road on the Old Connecticut Path, after having cut around a section of the old path that has been lost, as you can see, the residents have reconfigured the landscape to block some of the streams, to make small ponds along where the path formerly passed. Now, as we cross Westford Hill, we come to a meadow that leads the last short distance up to Charles Chisholm's uncle's farm on Codfish Flats roads, or what's now known as Lips Road. Across the meadow, there's a notable ridge in the field that forms the bed of the pathway. And although it's been erased for modern farming, Charles Chisholm noted in his youth he remembered a strip of land that had never been plowed that was here along the Old Connecticut Path. Way leading to the trail entering the woods for the last stretch up the hill to the Chisholm farm on Lips Road, or Codfish Flat as Charles called it. We turn and look back along the course of the Old Connecticut Path and the ponds that are now there where the path once crossed. As we walk forward on the trail leading up to the Chisholm farm on Codfish Flat Road, it's apparent that the trail follows an easy, gentle grade that has been found to be good over the centuries, as it's still passable to this day. The trail reaches Lips Road, or Old Codfish Road, as Charles Chisholm called it, right at the spot that he described. As we come through the barway, we're located right between the two houses he said were part of his uncle's farm. One to the north, and as we scan across, we'll come to the barway on the opposite side of the road leading west, and the second house that he described as part of his uncle's farm on Codfish Flat Road. We've climbed from the memorial on Route 89 or Warrenville Road up to Westford Hill. We've had the opportunity to travel across what I call the Great Wall of Westford, the ford and the stepping stones across the Mount Hope River, and up across the meadows here on Westford Hill to the place of the Chisholm farms on the Old Connecticut Path. We'll have opportunity in future trips to head west from here as the trail goes over the hills to the Willimantic River and on to Hartford.